Hey guys, what is up? Unrested back again. And I gotta apologize for the late video. I recorded the whole thing, filmed everything yesterday, went back, listened to it, and the sound was just absolute garbage. I believe what happened was I left my Bluetooth headphone on and it tried to record through that, and I don't know why it did. I thought I turned everything off and recorded straight into the mic, but nope. Somehow it recorded into that, and it was just this verbally bad audio. Anyway, let's get off of that and get on to the subject of today. And we are talking more about gaijin who fail in Japan, why they fail, what kind doesn't make it when they come over here, and why don't they make it. A couple stories from me, and I guess just a bit of a shout out. I was watching Give Me a Flake, Give Me a Break Man the other day. He had a video with Molly from a really long time ago, and it was called If You're This Type of Gaijin, Don't Come to Japan. And that's what I was listening to, and that's kind of what gave me the idea to do this. I've kind of talked a little bit about this before. I think it was called like People Who Fail in Japan, and these are kind of a couple more stories about people I've seen fail or a certain type of person that would come to Japan and why they would fail. And, it's sometimes fine for someone to just come over and be a tourist and just shop around and just visit a few sites. I think that's really, really different from living here. And I think that's not always understood by people who move over here. Like maybe even people who visit first think that later they want to move here, but realize after they've made the full move that it's very different from what their experience was, as opposed to just walking around being a tourist, enjoying the shopping and city life and stuff like that. When you have to really meld with Japanese society, sometimes it can be very difficult. For example, one thing Victor talked about right away was that if you're someone who can't follow rules, then Japan is not for you. Him and Molly talked about how they both came to Japan with long hair and they had to have their hair cut because they said they just couldn't find jobs without short enough hair. I think that is true for a lot of Akaiwa jobs, a lot of English teaching jobs, especially if you want to do the ALT route of teaching like at high schools or middle schools or even elementary schools. But I did notice when I taught kindergarten out here, no one really cared how long my hair was. I think you have a lot more discretion with your look and how you are perceived when you're teaching the younger grades. But it is true once you start to get up there, especially if you're teaching adults, they do want you to be trim and proper and stuff like that. You need to come with a tie on if you're going to interview, of course. You need to be dressed to the nines. Always present your best first impression. And another thing that they talked about, which I didn't really think about before, was just showing up on time to work. They both had stories about guys who could not keep a job in Japan because showing up to work on time was out of the question for them. And my God, I have met so many people in so many different types of jobs who just lose their job here because they can't show up on time, which I feel like in America, most of the jobs weren't big about having a big leeway for when you could show up. I guess you could have a couple minutes here and there, like be 3 to 4 minutes late for the job, and no one really blinks or bats an eye. But in Japan, you definitely can't do that. Even being 1 to 2 minutes late. If the train causes you to be late, everybody understands that. And in fact, a lot of train places will give you a ticket that says they were late because we messed up. But if it's something that's occurring every single day, especially at some of these jobs like the Akaiwa ones that start at like 10 a.m. in the morning, like if you can't be to work by 10 a.m., I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get it together. Same with teaching kindergarten, or I guess the hardest one might be like middle school and high school. I think for those, sometimes I had to get there between 7 and 7:45 a.m. I guess that could be a little bit more drastic, but I remember even hearing stories about the jobs I followed up on and took over for the last person who worked them, that they just couldn't show up on time. And it would always be some really goofy reason, like they didn't have an alarm clock that worked. They tried to use a bike to come to work and got lost on the way like all the time. And you're just like, that's definitely not true. I don't understand how you could get lost every time trying to come to work on a bike. That doesn't even make sense. Maybe the first day the route is a bit confusing, but then after that you should be fine. Most places too, like they'll literally walk you up to the door on your first day so that they know you understand the route. So I don't understand people's excuse of getting lost on the way. The other thing was just that they couldn't conform to any kind of dress code that the place had. So, for example, a lot of Kiowas, they want you to wear like a suit and tie, and then the person would try to start coming just with like a golf shirt on or even like t-shirt and jeans, and then they couldn't understand why they got fired. I mean, if you can't follow a dress code, these are like the most simple aspects of a job, and these are rules that if you break them, Japanese people aren't really going to yell at you or scold you or anything like that. They're just going to look at you like you're crazy because they've set these rules, and those rules are there to be followed, and everybody at the company is already doing it, and they kind of just wonder, why aren't you able to do these too? These aren't like super difficult rules, but you will be surprised. Some people come here and just refuse to follow any kind of rules and don't understand why they don't fall in line with Japanese society. There are some jobs in America where, like, let's say you've been there for a long time, you've got like this meritocracy or longevity going on with your job, and you can kind of be a bit of a rule breaker because they know you always get your work done. That may fly in America for some specific, types of jobs, but there really isn't going to be one here in Japan that is like that. Once you're hired, you are hired under the rules that they have in the contract, and you will follow those rules. Now, here's some other situations, and this time I wanted to kind of get out of the realm of teaching and into some other jobs. For example, one of the saddest ones I watched happen was I had a friend here who actually got a chance to work as a manga artist. And I shouldn't really say work. They got to be an apprentice, okay? So a lot of stuff out here, you can possibly get an apprenticeship. There's things like topiary arts. There really isn't other things as far as very traditional Japanese stuff goes. Like, I know I've had people ask me about like katana and blacksmithing and stuff like that, and maybe somewhere out in the countryside such a program still exists, but I would seriously doubt you would be able to be an apprentice for that, as that would probably be handed down from family to family. I think another one might be like kintsugi. You might be able to do that, where you're fixing plates using melted gold. But no matter what you're doing, it doesn't really matter, okay? Like, I've even had friends who did apprenticeships for tattooing out here in the old style tebori type, where you actually tap the needle into the skin. And they've all told me the same thing. As an apprentice, you are pretty much put on trial. You are there to be found out if you're really serious about taking the job. And when they want to find out if you're serious, they do it by testing you. And I don't mean testing you like every week you're going to have an assigned scheduled test that is an official test for that job. I mean, they're testing you in the sense that they might treat you with power harassment almost, like, and see if you can take it. Now, once you finally do actually get the job, they're not going to continue to treat you like an underling or like a trainee. They're going to treat you on an equal level, a peer level, but they're going to really test your grit to see if you can get through the apprenticeship. I've heard stuff where a friend of mine who was apprenticing to be a tattoo artist said he'd have to draw flash picture after flash picture, and his senpai, which he would be the kohai, that's the apprentice, the senpai is the master, would rip them up in front of him and tell him to start over again and again and again and again. There was one time where he made tea and he messed up making the tea, and the master threw the stuff down the stairs. He threw the plate and the dishes and everything down a set of stairs and told him to go clean it up because he didn't make it right. And this is just him being tested. They want to see if he'd stick around and really go through it, especially if you were a gaijin and you can have the chance to just escape back to your country at any time. Probably your testing is going to be even harder because they're not just testing to see if you're going to stick with the job. They're going to test you to see if you're going to stick with the country. There's no apprenticeship you're going to take where they're going to say, oh, yeah, we'll do it in English. Almost always you're going to have to do it in Japanese. And the one that I saw that really went horribly wrong was a guy who took on being a manga artist. He had a connection via this one girl who was a manga artist for her own small series that was about gyarus. If you don't know what that is a style of dress here in Japan where They usually bake under tanning booths for quite a while and then smear this sort of white makeup underneath their eyes, and they get this look that they call it the tanuki look or the raccoon look, where they have these big white dots around their eyes and they have this really dark tan skin, and that is sometimes called Yamaba, which is like mountain witch or Gyaru type style. They're often found hanging out with the whole Yankee crowd. You can look more into that. If I go into a whole style tangent, this is going to be a totally different video. But she had her own little manga about that, and she was actually able to get my friend an apprenticeship. And he was tested. That's what happened. He was tested, and he was furious with the tests that they were putting him through, to the point that he just completely broke character, ended up screaming back at his senpai, and was dropped out of the job and had to return to his home country. Now, what kind of things were they asking him to do? Well, they were asking him to put in crazy hours, which you're going to have to expect. They were asking him to work for free, which this is another thing you might have to do in as apprentice. They were asking him to do a massive amount of illustrations every day. And these were repetitive illustrations, so that he would master something like draw a person's hand and arm 50 times on 50 different sheets of paper. And he would complain to me and be like, sometimes I have stuff that would last 22 hours if I was going to do all the work. And it's kind of like, yeah, man, that's what they're doing. They're trying to test you to see if you can even put up with that. He's like, yeah, but I'd only get about 2 hours of sleep and stuff like that. But if you look into the really serious manga and anime artists, for example, Miyazaki, Ghibli films, you know it all, My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, that guy sleeps 2 hours a night as he works on new movies all the time. He only gives himself about 2 hours of sleep, then draws the rest of the day, works on backgrounds, everything like that. If he's doing that at his age and he's the master of his company, then it's not a big deal if a manga artist asks you to do that, not forever, but just while you're doing your apprenticeship. And if you can't take that, is it abusive? Yeah. Is it power harassment? Yeah. They are literally testing you to see if your will break with what they're going to put you through. Why are they doing that? Some people might ask. Well, there's going to be points where you hit deadlines where you will actually have to put in that 22-hour day. And if you're not willing to do that, they don't want you as part of the company. They don't want to see your manga come out with their company and find out you're going to just be missing these deadlines all the time. That's the other thing, is things are always on time in Japan. Things are delivered on time in Japan. And if that means it's a ton of overtime, then it's a ton of overtime. They're not going to suddenly start to feel bad for you, be like, oh, you're a gaijin. I know you're used to only 8-hour days, so you're here in Japan, and we'll go ahead and adapt your traditions from your country and make sure you only have to work those 8-hour days. You're completely deluded if you think that's what Japan's going to do, change their system for you. Is it harsh? Is it unforgiving? Yeah, I'm not going to talk to you and say this is completely acceptable. Everybody should have to do this. But I am saying that if you do want to follow this route, if you do want to be exposed to what the true hardcore traditional arts are and study as an apprentice, as a kohai under a senpai within some sort of art in Japan, then you've got to take it ultra serious. And this guy, he couldn't do it. He couldn't believe he had to work more than 8 hours for this apprenticeship. He couldn't believe he wasn't getting paid for it. And he couldn't believe that his senpai snapped at him one day and kicked him out of the program. And it's just kind of yeah, that's, they would have expected any Japanese person to do this. They're not going to expect anything different from a gaijin. They're going to expect you to try and meet the same levels that the Japanese applying to the same job would do. There was another one. He tried to open his own restaurant here in Japan. And this is another one where pretty much not doing the research is what really screwed him up. He decided to open it in an area where it was kind of popular to have foreign-type restaurants. It was Kitahorie, close to Amemura, which pretty much means American Village. So you can understand that would probably be a more international area of Japan, as international as Osaka can get, which is not very international if you compare it to something like New York. But that's what he wanted to do, and he wanted to try and test it out there. And he decided to go about it in possibly the worst way ever. Number one, most people opening a restaurant or a small business in Japan want to live where they open the restaurant. That way, if you're paying rent on your place, you're only paying rent for one place. You're only paying rent for the building that you're in and your business is in. You're not paying rent for a house and then also for a business on top of it. Rent, especially in business areas, can get ultra high. He was paying $18,000 a month. And to give you an idea of how much that would cost to move into, you've got to realize that key money is usually 3 times rent for the first month. So that means you're paying 18,000 times 3 just to break into that area. And then on top of it, he decided to have the whole place refurbished. The only way he was able to do this was he had actually inherited a bunch of money right before he came to Japan from a relative who had died. And he ended up blasting through nearly $250,000 to open this place, refurbish it, and not even test the area out with the stuff that was already in the kitchen area of the restaurant. So what I'm trying to say is he bought a restaurant place to use and convert for his cooking of Australian food. It already had ovens, it already had stoves, it already had cooking ware, it already had sinks and everything like that, but he was not happy with that and wanted to import a bunch of foreign tools, machines, and everything like that, and paid somewhere over $170,000 to have all this stuff imported and installed in the kitchen there. The place completely refurbished, which you kind of have to do. Some of those restaurants get pretty dirty after they've been used for a while. But the people did ask before he moved in, hey, do you want to just let us leave everything here for you so you can use the facilities we already have, and then you see if this place works out for you, and you can have it converted into whatever kind of kitchen form that best suits your priorities as far as running a restaurant here. No, he wasn't willing to test that out. He wanted it his way right away. He lasted a total of 3 months with that restaurant. Number one, the portions were too big. He didn't even test to see like what portion size people would eat. He didn't test himself out as a cook at another restaurant first. He didn't check out what people would be into as far as side dishes, a la carte, and absolutely refused to put rice as a side order on anything. And we're talking in Japan, people have rice with everything. If you order a pizza for your house from Domino's, because yes, Domino's exists in Japan, people will still eat rice on the side with it. And he refused to put that on there. The motto of his restaurant was, there's more to life than rice. And, he was a good cook. His food did taste excellent. It was great stuff. But Japanese people who I served there, because I actually worked as a waiter there for a short time while it was open, constantly asked for rice on the side. And I would tell him this all the time. I'd be like, I think maybe, you have bread as a side offering, potatoes as a side offering. You might want to just add rice on there. He's like, no, that's exactly what my restaurant is against. And it's like, okay, I get it. I understand. Like, you want it to be authentic Australian cuisine and everything like that. But just like, the Japanese, when they come to America, they usually adapt some of the recipes to suit more American tastes. You kind of got to do the same thing if you're opening a restaurant in Japan, even if that means adding something small like rice on the side. No market research for the area. Found out later that the area that he opened his restaurant in did not have a lot of people interested in more of the foreign type cuisine in that area. The area he had opened it in was more so a white collar business area with your typical salaryman. And those people just weren't very interested in coming by and testing something new on their lunch break to see if they liked it or not. You only have like your 45 minutes to take a lunch break. You're not going to gamble on whether or not maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. You're going to go eat your traditional Japanese food. And the reason he had done this is he thought he was in an area where other restaurants would be combined with his to serve foreign food, but he was just barely outside of the area where he was more on the office worker side of Kitahorie rather than the more popular, ritzy sort of foreign international trade area. And so the traffic he was getting wasn't that group that enjoyed that sort of international flair. On top of it, there was a lot of things he refused to do. Another guy who refused to put in more than 8 hours a day. I think especially, like, I've opened my own business here in Japan too. I had my own school running for 5 years. It still continues to run as a friend runs it right now. And I was working way longer than 8 hours when I first opened it, especially the first 3 years. I mean, if I wasn't there teaching students, I was out there on the street, banging the pavement left and right to hand out flyers. And this guy he refused to hand out flyers. And Japan is definitely a place where you've got to do the flyer stuff to get your place noticed. And he refused to do that. What he would do instead is he would go to nearby stores and say, hey, do you mind if I put like some of my flyers here in your stores and then I'll put some of your flyers in my store? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. But like the other businesses around him were not eateries. They were, like clothing stores or different. And it just, nobody goes into a clothing store saying, where am I going to go eat after this? It just wasn't profitable. And within 3 months, he had lost $250,000 more or less and abandoned the place and went back to his own country. It did not work out at all. Let's see, one other one, and this one was another one that kind of Molly and Victor talked about on theirs, was a guy who came to one of the schools I worked at and was able to get work for a working holiday visa for 3 months, but came there with no degree and no money and no future plans. So you can come on that working holiday visa where you're allowed to work temp work, and then after that 3 months, you got to return home and either renew your visa and come back or land a full-time job that allows you to get a full-time working visa. And it is possible sometimes to convert a tourist visa or a working holiday visa into a full-time working visa. Usually you do have to have some sort of degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is in. As long as you have a degree, it's usually very easy to get approved. But if you don't, then you need to have some kind of contingency plan. He refused to go online and finish up his college classes to get the degree. He refused to save up money to be able to purchase his return ticket home. And by the end, he was down to like a couple thousand yen and started to ask everybody at my place of work if he could borrow money. And this is very close to a story I heard from Molly and Victor where they said there was a guy who was down to about 5,000 yen and started calling them up asking if he could borrow money to help him get out of the country for a bit and renew his visa so he could come back in for another 3 months. And it's like, you don't wait till you're down to that little bit of money and that little bit of a plan to figure out where you're going to go from here. I remember sitting one time in Amemura in a place called Senkaku Koen, and a guy showing up there and talking about how he couldn't land a job anywhere in Japan because he hadn't come there with any kind of credentials whatsoever, had no degree. And he started asking my friends and I what jobs we worked, and we told him we were teachers at the time. And he kept asking if we would hook him up with a job. And it's like, what kind of power do you think we have here as teachers? We're not the people who hire at the job. It's the Japanese managers who open the company, and they're allowed to hire 90% Gaijin staff, but they usually always have to get it approved through immigration. And the easiest way for them to do that is to send in some sort of credential that says this is why they're in the country, because they have this degree to be able to teach and stuff like that. That makes it a lot easier for them. And if they have a choice between you, who makes it very easy to get approved via having a degree, and someone who doesn't, sadly, that's going to leave you off the list for the first to be approved. At immigration, too, it's the same problem you're going to run into. And I'm not saying that degree makes a huge difference. Honestly, I don't think I really used my degree much as an art degree teaching English in Japan. But that was one requirement that made it very easy to get the work visa. Last but not least, this is kind of a sad one, and I'm not trying to mock this person. I'm not trying to make fun of them, but I am letting you know of a situation where this person came to Japan with an idea that didn't work out the way they had planned. They were a really, really large girl who came to the place we worked at Nova. And when I say large, I don't just mean fat. Fat's fine. There's chubby people in Japan. There's fat people in Japan. Look at Tikio Sam. I mean, he's a rather large guy, and he does fine in Japan. This girl was morbidly obese. We are talking like trouble walking a few kilometers at a time. This is, this was a struggle for her. Had to take the bus everywhere, had to take the train everywhere, use the elevator to go up and down the building that we worked at, did not use the stairs. And she was big, to the point that, one of those people where you can hear them breathing hard every time they even just move their seat or something like that. And she had come to Japan with her dream of marrying what she called an hot anime Japanese man. So I guess she had this imagined type of husband or boyfriend that she wanted that looked like the anime she watched, which was, these like BL boy love and romance slice of life anime. And she was finding herself rejected at every turn because she said they made fun of her for her weight, which I don't know if they really made fun of her, but she said they kept asking her if she had metabo syndrome, which means metabolic syndrome. And it was that they were concerned that she was far too overweight to be healthy enough to marry and stuff like that. And I know that sounds pretty rough, but in Japan, they do look at being like morbidly obese as a sickness. It's not something where they're just going to be like, oh, we got to be, fat friendly. We got to be, non-fat phobic and stuff like that. They will be rude about that. That is the only thing I think Japanese will be really rude about. They will talk to you about their concern about your weight. And every guy she had met, every guy she had tried to date, brought this up right away. And for her, she was really offended. And I guess she had never done any kind of research on this or anything like that. There's even companies where they have you do a health test every year. And every company makes you do this. You have to go through a physical every year. And if you are over a certain amount of weight, they will assign you exercise classes to get you back down under that. And it's not because they're trying to be fat phobic or be mean to you or anything like that. It's for insurance purposes, which, the insurance can go down on how much they have to pay for you. And because they actually do worry about your long-term health with you working for the company long-term. And these were problems that she was stating as a sort of discrimination against her. Now, I'll leave it up to you guys what you think about that, but she eventually ended up going back home and calling Japan a disgusting country because of how they talked to her and treated her about her weight. And I know most of you are probably thinking this is an American. No, it's not. It is a New Zealander who went through this. So it wasn't, what you're thinking of as a typical overweight American. And I'm American. I can say it too. I know a lot of us were like, 63% of us are overweight there. This was a New Zealander who went through all this, and it wasn't a thyroid problem or anything like that. I do understand. I have a cousin who has a thyroid problem that makes them overweight, and no matter how healthy she eats, she's still overweight, and that's not her fault. That's just her thyroid. But this was somebody who just chose to pretty much eat McDonald's for all 3 meals of the day, which I couldn't believe. I don't know how you even afford that on the budget that you make as a teacher. That's quite expensive. But this was hard for her, and what she hadn't done before she came here was research the fact that Japan takes weight really seriously. So probably my most controversial thing I talk about on this channel. I hope I don't offend anybody by talking about that one, but I always want to be real. I want to talk about what really happens in Japan. I try to always keep it as real as I can. What do you guys think about these 3 stories today? I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Have you heard any other stories about people coming to Japan feeling rejected or dejected, ignored, troubled, turned down, fired, rejected by a job, a person, a place, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a family member? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear any of the stories that you guys have. If you guys do want to help support the channel a little bit more than what we have right here, of course, a view, a like, a subscription, that always makes me super happy. That's payment enough. If you want to go one extra step for $1.90 a month, it's extra 4 videos, 1 extra video every week. Tomorrow, my members will also be getting an extra video. And for those members, I just want to give them a quick shout out right now. And those members are, hold on, give me a second here. Members. We got a bunch of new ones now, so I got to add some onto the list. Okay. We're actually up to 47 now. Colton Kilpatrick, John Manbob, Alejandro Cicinero, Blap, 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 Humble Monk, Andre Sanchez, Raymond Beckman, Jay, Aaron Spooner, SSG, Sax Gamer, Eviscerations, Nas L, Ryan, Makoto OTP, Kaiser Grendel, Bridget Walton, Yon 6, Andy, Carolyn Markey, Mitchell, Impressive Tony, Matt Lee, Silver Stitch, 28, Jose Consulius, Murphy, Draz Creates, Light Lolouch, Smile Kita 13, Worm Self, Chrissy Meow, Obscuric, Sriracha, Frorasu, No Dub, Only Raw, Citrus, Steve Ring, Fat Jaskins, Sprinkly Donut, Yodaru, Ricardo Contreras, Anna Loki, Slayer Duck, Blind Man Travels, Jonas Slocum, Ice Cold, Reinhard or Die Trying, Trek Nick, and I Am Sandpaper. Guys, thank you so much for keeping this channel going. You're the people that really keep it alive and keep me motivated to keep making these videos. And I hope to give you a new one tomorrow for all those members. Until next time, I have been Unrested, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.